This is Adrian speaking, and I'm here with Helen.
Hello.
And this is the first episode that we've done that we're not in person.
Yeah.
So the dynamic might come out as a little bit different for people listening.
Yeah, we're kind of across the internet.
Yeah. But if you haven't heard to the podcast before, I'm a musician from Mexico. Helen is a director from Ireland, Northern Ireland.
That's right.
And yeah, we're just interested in talking about movies. We're not experts, but we try to have a Lacanian and Hegelian readings of whatever movies that we're looking at. So this is us. We're going to try to talk about this movie that you told me about maybe when I was in LA earlier in the year. And I had never seen it. I like this director, but it was one of his earlier movies. I think it's its second feature. And it's Incendies by Denis Villeuneuve. This is 2011, I think.
Yeah, something like 2010, 2011, something like that. I can't believe I introduced this to you. I feel proud of myself. Because it's like really good.
Have you seen the other one that he did about the shooting?
No, I haven't.
I think it's called, I forgot what it's called. I think it's some shooting that maybe was in Canada. And it's actually the brother. The actor that does the brother role. He does. He's like the main guy. He's the shooter.
Oh no, I haven't seen it. But this is obviously it's French language film, but like Quebecois. I always find Quebecois like hilariously. It's obviously, I mean, like any accent sounds weird to a given person, but like it's such, and they have like really. There's a term like a calque, which is a non-translation where you take a direct phrase from a language and just like impose it on the other language. And because obviously Quebec is right close to the American border, and there's loads of like Americanisms that infiltrate the language. So they say things like, I mean, this is from my college linguistics course, so I could be wrong, and this could be like 20 years out of date, but like to park your car in French is stationner, sa voiture. Well, you just say stationner. And in Quebecois, it's apparently parquer son char. And they like have this American accent, or they say like, so a can of beans, apparently. So in French is une boîte d'haricots. And in Quebecois, it's like un can de beans. Apparently.
I have nothing to say.
I don't know.
You're like an international woman. I feel like so bland when it comes to that kind of stuff because I just grew up in like South US, like just in Phoenix and El Paso, just like the most boring. It's like the asshole of the US.
I have to say I spent some time in Phoenix a number of years ago, and it was like very, when I went the first day, I was like, I'm going to get the public transport and go to the city center and like visit the monuments and go to a cafe. And I literally got on like a tram, and it ended up for like 2 hours just going nowhere. And I was like, where's the nearest Whole Foods? And people were like, ha ha ha, what are you doing? You know, there's like nothing there.
Anyway. No, I mean, I think the most exciting place where I lived was in Italy. We lived in Siena for, I think, a few months. I think 5 months we spent in there.
That's cool.
And it was pretty cool. I wish I could do that again.
You were saying
I told you the other day, it's like, that I might retire in Italy. I went to this really nice town called Pistoia. Yeah. And I loved it.
You fell in love with it. Good. But it's like, Adrian, you're 29 next week, so you've got a long time.
I'm already thinking about when I retire.
I know. Oh, I don't know if we'll ever be able to. Well, I don't know. Maybe you will. I always think I'm just never going to be able to retire. Although I don't know if even I would want to retire. Like, I like work.
I just don't think that. I don't think that when I say retire, I just don't think that it means not doing anything.
Yeah, that's true.
It's more just like, I don't answer to anyone.
Yeah, doing what you want.
Because even, like, I mean, it's sort of like this master slave thing. Because even if don't answer to anyone, like if you're the boss, you still have to answer to the people that you employ.
You do. I know you absolutely do. It's like very. I mean, the whole capitalist system is stressful on everybody who is employed or an employer. it's just all.
Yeah.
Oh my god! Did I tell you talking about capitalism the other day? I was in Barnes and Noble, and I think I showed you the pictures. But Todd talked a lot about this when he was over in Belfast, about how capitalism like blandifies everybody in a protest against the kind of like milky everything of everything in capitalism. Is identity politics, because it's like, please, I'm different. But I was at the Barnes and Noble, and it was like the section, I guess like the biggest section now is self-help. And it's kind of sad because you go to Barnes and Noble, which I guess, all bookstores, just because they have to just stock a lot of rubbish now. Yeah. And it's there were like, I kid you not, tens of titles with a swear word in the title, like The Magical Art of Not Giving a Fuck, or F* or asterisk CK, and it was just like the same.
The one that I just didn't get, the one that was like unfuck yourself.
Yeah.
What the hell?
I think it was like people or
like if you're fucked up and you like unfuck up yourself, I guess.
I think it was about like self-sabotage and like getting out of your own way and stuff. Which is a hilarious thing, but I don't know. Anyway, it's kind of depressing.
It's probably all of those are like, do you think that maybe probably all of those are about just being more individualist, like don't care what people say,
like exactly.
No.
Yeah. And it's a lot of it is this women stuff, books directed at women being like, be more of an asshole, or like there was one actually titled. I have a pictures on my phone. There was one that was like, The Good Girl's Guide to Being and then it says nicer, calmer, more patient. It's crossed out a dick. Mm-hmm. And obviously asterisk instead of the I. I don't know. It's just like, I
think it's like.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was going to say about like how now there's all these protest movements that people possibly have the illusion that they're different, or they're actively resisting something, or they're protesting something. But capitalism has managed to capitalize on being different or out of the ordinary, or like being rebellious. Like the unicorn, I think, is the ultimate sign of neoliberalism. It's like, I'm special, I'm different, I'm unique, and it's like, no, you see it everywhere. Yeah. It's just hilarious. But
what do you think about that whole thing of like, you're a woman, don't smile, like smile less? It's almost like
what's that?
It's an injunction, right? It's just like, don't smile. If you're a woman, participate in this whole universalist sort of struggle to not smile anymore.
Who is that?
I was talking with Priscilla the other day about that. Oh, you never heard about that? It's just like, that women are always expected to seem sweet and to just be like really affable. And the sort of like the basic component of that is just a smile.
Yeah.
So there's all these like, I think there's a movement of just like women
resting
encouraging each other not to smile. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's funny because it's like, obviously a protest is by definition a non-dialectical no, and it requires the thing it's protesting against to exist. It's not radical in any way. But anyway, I don't know. I know. So basically, talking about self-help in the self-help books, to segue a bit to the film, the film it's kind of like a Greek tragedy myth structure with a kind of like detective story element in a war film. And I guess it kind of like, it's interesting in terms of psychoanalysis because the great segue is that self-help is different from psychoanalysis. Anyway, but psychoanalysis is like the non-answer answer, or like the non-help help, as in there's nothing that's going to change your life. There's no answer out there. There's no great all-knowing being, that there's no kind of like finitude.
The analyst doesn't know anything.
Exactly. And so obviously that's kind of the different from self-help, because self-help is like, do this and you'll be better. But having said all that, if we know that psychoanalysis is like a non-answer answer and there isn't an answer, can we not just get to the point of being like, yeah, there's no answer, and just like get it intellectually without having to go through, for example, psychoanalysis for years? And I was talking to a friend who's reading in depth like a Zizek book at the moment, and it's about is the sublime object of ideology, and about how ideology functions, and about how we can't just experience it intellectually, like the lesson that there's no answer. We have to go through our own personal myths and fantasies. So I guess in psychoanalysis, like the fantasy or the like, so in capitalism, the fantasy is like money, like the myth is like money. For Claude Levi-Strauss, who's this really good anthropologist, it's the idea of myth. And in psychoanalysis, it's like dreams and fantasies. And like, so the dream and fantasy is like your own personal, like, reaction formation, understanding of like how you are in language. And so it's like this arbitrary thing that you like create to like vaguely understand the world. But like the fantasy or the dream is analyzed to reveal a message. And the message isn't like, oh, you're dreaming about buying houses, you want to have a child or something, or you're dreaming about carrots, you want to have a rabbit. Like there's no like answer in the dream. Like when you analyze a dream, it's like totally messy and there's multiple desires and meanings there at the same time. And basically the message of the dream is like, there's no answer. But you have to go through the analyzing of your own particular fantasy or dream in order to come to that realization. I probably haven't. Which might sound
maybe sort of nihilistic, or that there's really nothing there.
Yeah.
But actually, I think it's the opposite, because I've talked to a few people about sort of the psychoanalytic process that you go through when you go into your sessions and engaging with this whole dialogue with the analyst. And one of the things that they say is just like, well, what's next for your life?
Yeah.
Like what comes after you've gone through all of these changes? What do you get out of it?
Yeah.
And I think that maybe psychoanalysis is an answer that is unlikely and sets you free. It's kind of emancipatory, because you stop asking that question, or it stops mattering.
Yeah.
Like, you stop looking for what's the next big thing in my life, or what can I see as sort of like the motor that gives meaning to my life in a way that really maybe is the problem. The way that we just become sort of vacuums for things that will give us momentary meaning is precisely, I think, that the problem.
Yeah.
And being okay with not having an attachment that is that strong and that brings that much, supposed stability to your life. Like learning to live without that it's a very freeing thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of plays into the film, because the film is about a mother in Canada who's from a Middle Eastern country originally, who dies. And it comes to light that she's had she was a political refugee, but she's had like a really traumatic life. And after she dies, she tells her twin adult children that she can't really be laid to rest. She can't have a headstone until they learn what has happened in the past, to kind of like close the loop. And she sends them on a quest. She gives a lawyer who was her employer, but her lawyer who is enacting her will, she gives a letter to her daughter and her son, twins. And one of them gets a letter saying, give this to your father. And the other one gets a letter saying, give this to your brother. And so these two people are set on a journey of finding out who their father and who their brother are. And
this is spoiler heavy, by the way.
It's extremely heavy. And in discovering that, there's this real kind of extremely powerful familial narrative that comes to light that she could have just told them. But it's like, why does she send them on the journey to discover it rather than just telling them? And it's almost like the journey in and of itself is all of the meaning and carries all of the weight. And because of affect, like the way we are as humans, like we attach to meaning to stuff, because I'm not an expert on how affect functions, but it's really like how you sensorially, emotionally experience life. The like act of living is so powerful. So you have to go through the personal narrative and really feel it as affect to like get the quote unquote lesson of it. If that makes sense.
Well, the thing is that like, yeah. Well, the thing is that like, if we hear the truth immediately and it just hits us without some kind of process that we go through, it doesn't do anything. I think that it becomes like a reel that we can't really tarry with, so we just repress it. And suffer the consequences throughout the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
Of just trying to come to grips with that truth. But I think that the other way is the other way is different, because you live it out. You don't just understand it. And I think that that's one of the other things about psychoanalysis, is that understanding is secondary, living is primary. When you understand, because you can understand, and like actually the analyst, if he knows, can tell you like what your problems are, like it's that you want to sleep with your mother or whatever. And if you hear that outright, it won't really have an effect on you. You have to live in a way that you get to that eventually. But it's almost just, it becomes kind of obvious at the end. And I really do think that real psychoanalysis is not about knowing the truth, it's about getting to it.
Exactly. I'm always like, oh, if I just read lots of Freud or whatever, I won't have to pay for a therapist. And it's like, it just doesn't really work like that. It's funny because like Todd's book that I found so powerful, Capitalism and Desire, I felt like that was so transformational, because by dint of certain things being explained in a really like life relevant way, you can really understand how it applies to your personal narrative. But like very dry theoretical Freud is not going to really help you. You'd be like, like reading like Bruce Fink or something, or like an introduction to Lacan, you'd be like, oh, that's interesting. But it doesn't really resonate in the same way. One of the other ways that the reason why you need the session is because you need two people talking to each other. And I think one of the things that for the analysand becomes sort of like existentially meaningful is when you hear your analyst have a slip. It's happened to me already a couple of times. Really?
And you start to get into this whole, I mean, it allows for transference to be a little bit easier, because you start to wonder what the slip means. And it the analyst becomes like even more enigmatic to you. So
because you start to be like, what is he thinking? It's like,
exactly.
When you have, I don't know if you ever experienced this, but when you have like a teacher at school and they're this kind of like non-person. And I actually, after I left college, I taught at like a boarding school for a couple of years, and everybody lived on site. And it was almost like the fact that the teachers lived there and you were like living in apartments or houses in between the boarding houses, I think the fact that they knew like a tiny bit about your private life was even more intriguing. But you were like this kind of like unreal being, and I think teachers are obviously like that. There's obviously like a lot of transference that goes on in that kind of relationship, but there was always like if you had like a projector in the classroom and your email came up on your computer, it would always be like, oh my God, I don't know, but it's always intriguing, when it's like mystery.
I was going to ask you, you were talking about right now about Greek tragedy.
Oh yeah.
And do you think that, I'm about to go into Judith Butler language territory here, but do you think that, it's not really my cup of tea, but I don't even want to use the words, but do you think that maybe Greek tragedy is the best sort of representation of, or the more pure representation of just regular life? Because to the way that I understand Greek tragedy or Greek comedy is that you go through a struggle and in the end things sort of stay the same.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because like I have to say, this is like, I don't know what the Mexican equivalent of A levels is, but in the UK,
the equivalent of what?
A level. It's like your final, like when you leave high school, you do like 3 or 4 subjects and you like specialize in. And one of the ones I did at high school was ancient Greek, my A level, and I literally have forgotten everything. But obviously, we studied all of the like Greek tragedies, and I'm literally going to sound like a real idiot because I've forgotten everything. But I have to say, I mean, it's interesting that Denis Villeuneuve chose this script to direct. I don't know if he chose it, but I watched an interview and it sounds like he was interested in this play. And it's a play written by a Canadian guy of like Middle Eastern origin originally. And all of his work has a kind of like non-preachy moralistic element to it. But it's funny because it's like, as you say, the moral is like, well, what's the moral? It's kind of like really depressing, but it has some kind of like powerful, resonant like tragic element, and I guess Greek tragedies do that. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, they do. I'm just thinking about like particular Greek tragedies. They do always end up in like, basically, I mean, it's the tragedies in the world. There's obviously lots of like comedy and stuff, but in
and that was the Judith Butler parts. Like, that was the Judith Butler part. Like, do you think that life is performative?
Life is performative.
Greek tragedy. No, of Greek tragedy specifically.
Greek tragedy is like performative of the way life is.
Backwards. Like, if it's the most, maybe not the highest sort of like understanding of life. But really, it's that. It's, I mean, what we're talking about psychoanalysis, that you can go through a whole process, but really it's not so that you can radically change your life, but so that you can learn to accept your life.
Absolutely. So it's I mean, this is the kind of like films that I like to make. It's like you use the story form because that kind of, I don't know, like a story is, or a film or a piece of fiction is necessarily has a moral to it, but like I feel like the work that I do has like a non-moral, like it's what's the word? It's kind of like an acceptance of life, or a kind of, begins with a C. I always forget what this word is. It's not convalescence. It's not a word that begins with C that means like, not comfort.
Conflation?
Consolation, consolation. But, you do require a kind of like a myth form in order for that to kind of resonate with you. So, but the Greek...
How is that different from like Jung stuff?
No, because I think Jung is like, the thing is that Jung has like, his message is that the unconscious is a compensatory mechanism, and that there is a message there for you to improve your life. And that's basically all the kind of conventional Western story form is, that you can improve yourself in some way. But I guess, the Greek form is more, consolation, consolatory rather than seeking,
Yeah, it was funny because like when Peterson in the debate he talked about psychoanalysis, he gave sort of like his definition of it. It was basically just like self-help.
Yeah, no, it's ridiculous. It's like the opposite of self-help.
The analyst tells you, he guides you through the traumas of your past, and then you sort of like analyze that, and then that helps you to be a better person. It's just like, isn't the whole point of psychoanalysis that you start becoming less and less important, and that your past starts becoming less and less
exactly.
important?
You come to the point where you matter nothing in this world. No one, like, do you know what I mean? It's like probably the greatest benefit is for you not to exist, to be really nihilistic about it. But actually, no, the self-improvement aspect is that you can actually enjoy your circumstance when you cease to seek an answer, or cease to sacrifice yourself, or seek to revolve around, or continue to revolve around death drive. So you can actually like properly enjoy your life when you're not trying to escape from something. And I think, self-help kind of encourages people to believe that they're happy by dint of pursuing a goal of happiness, or thinking that by going through something you're going to be happy. But it doesn't really work that way. Happiness only exists in enjoying your dissatisfaction and being all right with it, And that's not to say that like nice things and nice moments can exist, but kind of in an existential sense, happiness isn't something has a futurality to it. But I know, but that's the thing. It's like, I think storytelling is a powerful form because of this notion of affect, and that it, in our kind of contemporary scene and under capitalism, it's kind of been hijacked by this kind of like progress as a notion, and self-improvement and perfectionism, and the idea
aggressive progress.
Exactly, and the idea that
cusses and
it's like fuck you, exactly. But that there's some meaning to your existence, and like that's where you get like Joseph Campbell and all that kind of stuff. But I think the story form can still be used in a Freudian sense to help people to accept, their life as it is. But yeah, I also have it. So yeah, it is interesting that the film itself has this kind of like mythic Greek tragedy form, and the Greek tragedy often revolves around families. And as you said, like the Judith Butler point that it's kind of like there's a real truth to Greek tragedy. It's interesting that like Freud took on, you know, the story of Oedipus, and also like Jung took on the Electra story as the Electra complex as well. But yeah, I mean, there's obviously something really kind of powerful to it, and how it all kind of familial relations fit together.
Yeah. Isn't sort of like the Greek tragedy something that a journey that a person goes through that leads them to a realization that is traumatic or that is sort of revelatory and it creates some kind of rupture or an event.
Yeah.
But that eventually they go back to the same place. I'm not very well versed in Greek stuff, but I'll give you like a Jewish parable, and you probably know it. It's the Prodigal Son that he... Actually, Kessler Bruin has this reading of it that I think is pretty interesting, and he reads it not as because, you know, my dad, for example, or just like a lot of pastors here in Latin America and the U.S., like they love the story of the Prodigal Son because it's like you go out and you sin and you do whatever you want, and eventually you just come back home.
Yeah,
and the Father is waiting there for you with arms open, and you know, it's a story about forgiveness, really, and sort of like the omnipotence of the Father, because all glory goes like back to the Father, and it's just like, you know, he's so selfless, and I also never got that, because it's like if you're a father, it doesn't matter what your son or daughter did, like whatever they do, you just like you want them to come back.
Yeah.
So I never understood that whole, like, you know, just like the Father is admirable because he wants his son back. But anyway, the way that he reads it is that this guy, the prodigal son, like wants to leave home because maybe things are not right at home, or he just goes on the journey that just, it's like he wants to leave already, because, you know, there's at some point when you're in your life, and if you pay attention to it, you're gonna go against the Father, and that's sort of like the ritual of like becoming a man. I forgot what psychoanalyst said this, but it's like, if you don't have problems against your father, you got bigger problems to worry about.
Yeah.
So he goes through this, you know, normal thing that he leaves his home, and, you know, he goes through all of this process. He goes to poverty and whatever. And what happens at the end is that he just decides to go back home. Yeah. He gives up on life. He gives up on it. Like, he doesn't want to confront life in poverty and in a struggle. He doesn't want to go through a struggle. So he goes back home, and the Father, you know, gives him his gold ring back and puts like really nice clothes on him and throws him a big party. And Kester says, like, that's just like, it's the worst possible story, because it's a story where the guy finds an event. He finds a rupture outside of his house, and instead of embracing it and going through it and building sort of like his own life, he just decides to go back home, go back to the womb in general. So what do you think about that? Do you see a correlation between that and Greek tragedy?
Yeah, that's interesting. I really am not well versed in the Bible at all. And I guess, well, the thing is, I mean, I personally would interpret that story that, like, either way, it's fine. If he goes home, that's totally fine. Or if he embraces the rupture, that's fine.
But I mean, I do think that there is something about, you know, sort of a struggle against the Father. And I mean, Zizek talks about this a lot when it comes to the Bible specifically. And, you know, he sort of quotes Jesus as saying, like, you know, whoever doesn't hate his father and his mother, you know, does not inherit the kingdom of God. And I think that for Jesus, the kingdom of God was just sort of like this replacement of the state. You know? And I don't know. I don't necessarily mean it in like a familial way, but more just like, you know, what does the Father represent? And it's comfort. I think it's an inability to sort of...
I think it's maybe the thing is, I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's like one way, or I guess like a symbol can have many different things that it represents, like the Father. But so I was just thinking about narrative in the idea of fantasy, narrative, stories, myth. And obviously, Lacan talks about les non-dupes errent, the non-duped err. So that like to be in the world and to be in language is to be like duped by fantasy and by the idea that there's some like arbitrary narrative to your life. And in order to enter that, you have to go through, le nom du père, which is obviously a play on words, the name of the father. So that non-dupe heir, the non-duped heir, and the name of the father are kind of connected. But the name of the father is like, symbolically in that sense, it's like kind of mean, standing in the way of you and your relationship with your mother. And if you don't separate from your mother, then you become like a psychotic and you're not properly like imbued with language and therefore like fantasy and like narrative and stuff. So I guess I've always seen like the figure of the father as like a real meanie, you know? And like
no, I don't think so. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I'm not sure, because I think that sort of like returning to the father is, in a sense, sort of like the accompaniment of wanting to return to the womb.
You know, I actually see what you mean. Yeah, that actually like, and maybe those two kind of interpretations are correct in that like, if you return to your father, then like that kind of symbolic name of the father hasn't been instantiated properly. I don't know. And I actually think
that maybe here the key word is not the father, because I think that's almost sort of like the natural sort of balance of life. It's that eventually you will leave the father.
Yeah.
That's just life. But returning to the father, I think that's the key sort of like toxic element of the story.
Yeah, so family history as a detective story. What do you have like any particular thought about like why the story Incendies is like is set up like a detective story?
Well, I think it's just the way that it's shot. I think it's sort of like a noir thing to it. He's always had that, I think, Villeuneuve, in the way that he tells the stories visually. You know, I think that maybe Prisoners is his most sort of like, you know, I hate to say pure, but I think it's the one that sort of, it's more eloquent of like his view and his style, because it's directly a detective story. But I don't know. There's like you don't know everything, because a lot of movies you're just omniscient and you know what's going on, even though, you know, the characters don't. And in this one, I think there's even a reversal, because when it comes to the point where you realize that the father and the brother are the same person, you see, I forgot what her name is, but the sister, she's like, she gasps, you know, she's like, because the brother asks, like, can one and one make one? Yeah, no, I know. She gasps, you know, because she gets it, but at least I didn't. I didn't get it immediately. And then it goes into like telling you like the story of So I think that it has this sort of like, it keeps you in the dark a little bit. It doesn't hold your hand. And maybe that's
the power of the revelation is certainly stronger. And you do like go along with the, it's very experiential with the twins. I guess it's like there's a couple of things that I was just thinking of, and you know the thing we worked on, the novel Sinisterhood, it has this kind of same element. I mean, it's not a detective story, it's a crime story, but they're kind of similarly structured. And the idea, and Denis Villeuneuve talks about that, the idea of like coming to an understanding of something, or that families can repeat traumas, and it's only by dint of like bringing something to light that kind of chain can be broken. You know, you have this kind of like cursed family narrative. But the detective story as well, it's like, to me, it's very similar to psychoanalysis, you know, that, again, you could just find out straight away that this thing had happened. But the peeling back of layers, you know, is really how we experience, like the detective story is almost how we experience the world, you know, coming to understanding, kind of working things out. But yeah. Do you have any like thoughts on war films? Do you like war films?
No, I don't think. I don't really like war films. I can't remember one that I saw that, because you mentioned that you really like Dunkirk, and maybe that's
I did like it.
I think what it is, I don't like the aesthetic.
Yeah,
I don't like the colors, and like for example, everybody loved Breaking Bad.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I just like, it was okay to me. I wasn't like completely super into it,
Yeah.
and I think it had to do with the aesthetic.
Yeah.
I don't like the sort of like New Mexico, southwestern part of like the U.S.
Yeah,
It's very important to me, like to have sort of like a look that you can invest yourself in, and I didn't really like that. And it's the same with army stuff. It's just like, I don't know, the way that the movies look, like the greens,
the green
and the
and
grays
brown,
and all that stuff.
I know that certainly like aesthetics are like an emergent of like the like thematic properties of something itself. But I have to say, I do love war films just because, well, there's various reasons. Like, first of all, it's this kind of experiencing of reality in such an intense way, and obviously the film medium is like really visceral, and so it's kind of like transporting you to an, you know, certainly in the past or whatever, people experienced war a lot more than we do now, and I just find it like really compelling and shocking and like viscerally like intense to experience that. And also I think like the film form really well explores the idea of trauma. You can use things like repetition and being like locked in moments, and kind of certain films do it really well. I actually think Waltz with Bashir is a really, really good movie that does that. But also, so I was talking to Todd McGowan about this actually, and he was like, he doesn't like certain war films which feature, because you have war films that feature like the grand strategy and like the generals and all this kind of stuff, and also war films from the perspective of the soldier. And he was like, he doesn't like war films because he feels like from the soldier's perspective, because he feels like it humanizes the army. But I actually feel like it's a good thing in a way, you could argue, because it almost like shows the army as like a split subject, you know, kind of like renders it powerless in a way.
No, I don't know. I think I agree with Todd there.
Really, but, I don't know, because I actually think the military gets blamed for things that aren't the military but political fault, and actually the military in and of itself is designed to be an organization or a phenomenon that campaigns against going to war at all costs because they've lived it. And so you have like the structure of I mean, maybe it's not doing it very well because wars happen all the time, but like if you speak to people who are like in higher positions in the military, they will like attempt to refuse to go to war at all costs. And the people who are like really fucking gung-ho are politicians, you know. Yeah. And a lot of the people who join the military like have no choice, like poor working class men. I
mean, the one thing I would say is that I don't necessarily think that the military is autonomous. I think it's an arm for capital, or at least, you know, specifically when it comes to the U.S. The military complex is an aggregate of capital. So,
but this thing is, I would blame capitalism rather than the like. Do you know what I mean? Like the people who you know, especially when you have, it's like the police in 68. It's like obviously both the students and the police are victims of the system.
Did you see Hacksaw Ridge?
I haven't actually, no, but like Mel Gibson is quite a kind of like ideological, you know, in a certain way. But yeah.
Well, I think that's what Todd meant of like the humanization of the military. But there's a scene at the end there in Hacksaw Ridge where the main guy, he has a friend of his in the army just like fall, and he's not dead, but he needs to get him out of like the war zone, right? So it's really funny because like the way that he does it is that he grabs his rifle, and uses the rifle and like to sort of like lock onto his dying friend's like backpack.
Yeah.
So he grabs the rifle and drags him with the rifle through the rifle, like out of danger.
Yeah.
And I thought that was like very interesting because it's like you have this sort of like very human moment.
Yeah.
But you need like the film like needed this sort of like object of violence in between them in order to save them.
Yeah.
And I just think I think that the humanization part of it is like mistaken for, I think either it takes away from, it distracts from the action of the military or the inaction of the military. And it just, it diverts attention into this whole like, I'm fraternity and just like, and leave no man behind, which are all good things, but it's maybe they're distracting a little bit.
I mean, yeah, no, it is interesting. And also narratives around the military are kind of like, obviously at the moment there's like the 75th anniversary of D-Day, which is an interesting one. I mean, I always think that like D-Day was made possible by the extreme sacrifice of the USSR, Stalingrad.
Yeah.
Actually, the kind of some
you
of the
might
best,
actually like. No,
so
go
yeah,
ahead. Sorry.
some of the best war films are Russian. Have you ever seen Come and See?
No, I haven't
seen it. It's really good. I strongly recommend. What were you going to say?
No, that you might like then. I think Frederick Jameson. He wrote a book called Dual Power, and he lays out sort of like an alternative sort of state that is based on the military, because he looks into different types of sort of like complexes of authority, and he looks into mafia, religion, the actual state and everything, but he sort of makes his home in the military complex, and he sort of like lays out the possibility of maybe us having the military as a state. And there's actually a couple of communities in Mexico, political communities, dissident communities in the South that are purely militaristic. And I like that. Yeah. I like that, but it doesn't answer to the state. And I think maybe that's the difference.
Well, it's funny. You have someone like...
a military that answers to the state is like an arm,
Yeah, you have someone like Switzerland that has like basically never gone to war, and everybody does like 2 years conscription, And it's funny because Switzerland is an extremely rich country, but like everybody unifies around. And obviously it's more like...
But that seems more like
training.
Traditional.
Yeah. Yeah.
That sounds more like a tradition of just like, this is something that we do. Like
Yeah.
I
definitely think the thing is
martial arts sort of.
Yeah. I mean, capitalism does erode traditions. And there's something kind of leftist and collective about traditions. There's like a Hegelian argument for the royal family. If you see it as like a complete absurdity of birth and contingent, it's like a symbol for contingency. And that's all it is. And you can like then use it as a technology to remind yourself of the unfairness of life, and then to structure societies to rectify that. And so there's something collective about it. Obviously there's been a sort of like neoliberalization of the royal family, and you can see it also with military. There's been like a neoliberalization, like the frigging Captain America movie.
Right. And but don't you think that maybe there's a hunger for sort of collective things to do? And the military is like, it does have the face of something that is very sort of like collective. And because it's people sort of like sacrificing themselves and sacrificing themselves for each other. And there's something very true about that.
Well, I think there's something... So I always think, why is Russia always such like a prominent feature in, against which American ideology like formulates itself? And did you see Chernobyl? Which just came out on HBO.
No, I haven't seen it. I'm dying to see it.
It was excellent. It's really excellent. But, there's almost something fascinating and so foreign to neoliberal societies of the self-sacrifice of the Soviet Union, and it's like, if you like Stalingrad or general whatever, the Eastern Front in World War II, they didn't have enough weapons for soldiers. So the first lot you'd have pairs of soldiers where the front person had the weapon and the person at the back didn't, and they'd go off together, and then as soon as the person with the weapon was shot dead, the other one would take it. That just level of sacrifice is and I'm not saying like, obviously China, the Chinese capitalistic system is kind of like a horrible, and capitalism itself revolves around sacrifice, but the illusion of freedom, and really, sacrifice is the illusion of freedom. But, as in there is something.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that maybe the part that you like of it is the discipline part of it? Because doesn't China have like this incredibly large like tradition of discipline through the army? Yeah,
I mean, it's funny, they have all these like crazy displays of like.
Yeah. I've seen those.
And so like the sports and stuff, the kids just the training and everything. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I don't know. I think not to sound like reactionary in any way, but like just as like, I just don't think, you know, neoliberalism has a very clever way of making people think that individualism is like the right thing to do, or that, you know, getting rid of traditions and anything from the past is like a good thing. But I, you know, from a leftist perspective, think that's rubbish, you know.
You know what else I really liked about the movie? The soundtrack.
Okay, Radiohead. I know, it's literally, it's funny, in my notes I was like, Radiohead and movies discussed. Yeah, no, it's really good. It's really good. Yeah. I don't
know if like this happened to me actually the other day. I won't even say the name of the band, but I never listen to the lyrics ever when I'm listening to music.
Yeah.
I for some reason I just like I block out language completely. I just listen to the music and the mood and all of that. So I don't really know if there's like a connection there between the lyrics of the Radiohead songs and like the movie. But the other day I was listening to the song and I was like, for some reason I started paying attention to the lyrics and it was anti-Semitic.
Really?
Yeah.
Who
and
was
it was
that?
just like, what? But it was like a pop band. No, I won't say.
So you can text me later.
It was just like, but it was like, what are they talking about? Like,
really?
It was just weird. Like maybe I should start paying attention.
And it's why I totally don't pay attention to lyrics. My younger sister's like really good at like listening to. I've always been like totally like dyslexic when it comes to songs and just not knowing what they're saying and like say really embarrassing things when it's actually not what it is. And my younger sister's, I don't know whether she's actually extremely dyslexic, but when it comes to songs, she like gets the lyrics 100%. She'll sing along and I'll be like, oh my God, you know it all, you know? She also like remembers film scripts all the time. So I really don't.
But I used to do that. Like I knew, for example, like Home Alone. I just knew it from start to end, like the whole thing.
No, it's very, very good. I do, and I'm just trying to think. It was just maybe we should like wrap it up and talk about dialectics a bit more. But basically, the fact that we can disagree and agree at the same time, and also that, I mean, I guess maybe the point that I was trying to make with some of the things I was saying is that I think probably weirdly real leftism has more in common with conservatism than liberalism, and that liberalism is like a non-dialectical no, and that in a way it's more attached to the past than the past itself, as a protest to the past. If you see what I mean, because like loads of you know, for instance, I do think that the left is closer to conservatism because actually, you know, we're gonna talk also about this other film, but there's okay, so one of the things that, for example, like when we were talking to Todd, one of the things that he was saying is that he thinks that like fundamentalists really believe, like they believe what they they say. Yeah,
and I just don't think so.
Yeah, no, they don't. No.
So, and I think that the left maybe should. I don't know if there's like a difference between like sort of like the cynical position. And so I think there's a position of like cynicism from conservatives that doesn't necessarily or shouldn't maybe translate into the left.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's things that I fundamentally disagree with, like, but what I'm saying is that I think liberalism isn't the answer, and that leftism is. Because liberalism is more conservative than conservatism itself. Yeah. Because if you see, like, you know, I don't know what specific examples and stuff, but like, okay, conservatism, I think, has a fundamental misunderstanding of markets, of drive, desire, how money works. It's funny because like
they repress it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because I was talking to Peter about this. Like, to me, economics isn't like the study of economics. That's Marx is like the study of economics. Economics is like a way of finding, quote unquote, the most efficient way of using money for a certain thing. Like, it's a technology.
It's libidinal economy.
Yeah, so like Marx, what I would say is like a true economist, because he's like philosophically studying how markets, money, the capitalist system works. Whereas in general, economics is like ways of working out how capitalism can be the best it can be. Do you see what I mean? It's like different. Yeah, so it's not actually what it says on the tin, if you see what I mean. And so
doesn't Marx talk about that, like the way that capitalism deals with money, and that's why its economy cannot be anything else than fetishistic, but it's that it treats money as if it was sort of like a fetishistic object or some kind of magical object.
Absolutely. I know, maybe we should just do like a whole episode on Marx one time.
You know what I was thinking also? We really have to do an episode on the Matrix. Like do a non-Christian reading of the Matrix, because this is the test. Like if you're a Christian, this is a true test of if you're a Christian or not.
Yeah.
If you like the first one, okay, you're an evangelical. If you're a true Christian, with an atheistic core, you like 2 and 3. That's my sort of like.
Okay, so exactly. I think this is maybe the Prodigal Son. Okay. Let's say Peter's understanding of Christianity, the dialectical return to the beginning. Do you see what I mean? You go through atheism and you return to it. Like that's, so to me, like what I was trying to say with the Prodigal Son thing is like, you go out, you experience, and you return different, but you return. Rather than just like, I just think that constantly like, I'm going to keep like searching or living out like my shit life just for the fucking sake of it, because that's no better. It's like fine if you do.
I just think that when you do the dialectical return to the beginning, you like the master signifier has gone through a death already.
And you have a different relationship, but like you can still have a relationship.
Absolutely.
I think it's like the thing of like, just keep going through. It's like the liberal thing of like fucking just rebelling. Well, I think rebel has a different.
Well, I think you're just talking about like, I think you're just talking about like the hysteric position where it's just like, a problem for the sake of problem. And it's just like, it's like perpetually combative, I think.
Yeah. Well, but I think actually that perpetual questioning is like allows you to continue existing in a certain way, but I feel like but it's not like sort of like that. Well, I wouldn't say transcendent, but it's not a vehicle for like like real political change, I guess. I mean, it's interesting unless you like it's like an interpreted version of hystericism rather than just like going off on one for the sake of it without any like real change. But like I don't know, it's just the whole like the teenager I don't think is the rebel. Like for me, the real joy is being able to like just live in what material things aside, anything's fine. If you've got a roof over your head, you can eat stuff. But like I don't think like going out and living in a tent and being like fuck you dad is, but I could be misunderstanding that interpretation.
No, I think that was maybe the issue that maybe the word father, there's a lot of investment into it for everybody, but I think the better word would have been like master signifier. That makes so sense. It's like it's something that everything in your life refers to without justification.
Okay. Yeah, I should read the Bible one time.
No, I haven't even read it. I just like I know a lot of it because did you know that like when I was grounded as a kid, like they would punish me by like reading the Bible. So it's like I never like maybe that's why I like sort of like the radical core of the Bible, because it's like that would have been like the best possible sort of thing. It's just like read the Bible, and like that makes me realize that like like this is wrong, like they're punishing me, and
maybe they wanted you to be an atheist.
Like Christ, like the ultimate like disobeying subject.
Yeah, exactly. Nice one. Anyway, I'm just gonna look at my list of notes, see if there's anything else. I mean, there was some. I was going to talk about like commodity myth and dream, but we can save that for another time, maybe.
All right. Yeah.
Okay.
So should we?
Okay, we'll leave it there.
Should we call it there?
We'll wrap it up. We
right.
are disagreeing, agreeing, all at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you for listening, and until next time.
See you
Bye.
next time. Bye.